Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Asib, and in today's video, I'll explore the power of decorator functions in Python and show you how they can help tackle the problem of repeated code. So sit back, relax, and let's get coding. So we start off with an introduction to the problem of repeated code. I have here two functions, a function called simple arith and a function called complex arith. And they simply just, so in simple arith we have two numbers, and depending on the operator we just apply the operator to the two numbers. In complex arith we have three numbers instead of two numbers. So we can just call this with 1, 2, and let's say we want to add them together like that. Just activating the environment. There we go. Now, if we try to change this to a string, we get a type error. And to fix that, we can simply just create a try except block where we take num1 and cast it to an integer. And we need to catch the value error here and just return a message called invalid input, like that. Then we simply do the same thing down here for the second argument, like that. And if you run this, it works, the casting works. And if you run this with something that can't be casted, instead of raising the value error, we catch it and return this message. Now, if we want to, so we obviously want the same logic in complex arith, and the way to do that would be to copy and paste this code so that we have something like this, and also an additional block for num3, like that. Now, this is also where the problem lies, right? Because what we have is we have the same logic repeated 5 times, right? So 2 times here and 3 times here. And that is not something we want. The goal of this video is to teach you guys how to write dry code. Don't repeat yourself code. And we want code that is to the point, that is neat and clean. We don't want to repeat ourselves, and the way we have solved the problem here in this Jupyter notebook is just not it. It's not the right way to do this. Before we move on to decorator functions, there's one more thing that I need to introduce to you guys, and that is the fact that in Python it's possible to call a function using another function as an argument. To illustrate that, I'll just create a new example here. First of all, I create a new function called func that takes a single argument, and then I simply call the argument. Then I create a new function called func2 that takes no arguments, and it simply prints called func2, like that. Now what we can do here is that we can call func with func2, like that, and this would print called func2. So it's essentially like just replacing arg with func2, like that. Now, why is this important? This is actually the building block of decorator functions. And decorator functions are what makes us able to write code that is dry, right? To write code where we don't repeat ourselves. So a decorator function, so this is standard syntax for decorator functions. You can also find multiple examples online of this. But essentially you have a function here called decorator that takes a single argument called func. Then you have in the function body another function called wrapper that takes 2 arguments, a tuple called args and a tuple called kwargs. The wrapper then has, usually here in the wrapper body, we do something with args, or with the keyword arguments, and then we finally just call the original function with the modified arguments and keyword arguments. So in this case, it would be something like, so if we had something, so if func2 had some arguments here, num1 and num2, this args would be num1 and num2, and if it had a keyword argument, something like that, that's a keyword argument, then the kw args parameter would hold the keyword arguments. Now let's try to modify this to our example here. If you recall, we have this error checking that gets repeated a lot, right? So 2 times in simple arith and 3 times in complex arith. So what we can do is we can take that logic and put it inside our wrapper function. So the args parameter contains our arguments, and as you can see here, what we need to do is we need to do a casting on the nums. So what we do is we take args and just do some slicing. To only get the numbers and not get the last operator, like that. And we want this to be a tuple. I will get back to why in a minute. And what we do is we just call map with this, like that. Actually, maybe it's better to just create, to just store like that. Okay, so we have the arguments, and then we simply do that. So we are casting every argument, every number to an int, and then we are concatenating with concatenating the last argument, which is the operator, like that. And we obviously need to have a try except around this, where we catch the value error, like that. And here we just return the message like before, invalid input, just like that. So what we're doing here is we're taking the arguments out, right? So in case of simple arith, it's num1, num2. In case of complex arith, it's num1, num2, and num3. Once we have done that, we cast each of those to an integer, wrap it in a tuple, and then we concatenate the last argument. The reason for doing this is that we actually also need to call, store that as a variable. The reason we do this is because we need to create the parameter body, right? So when we're calling, so once we have made the modifications and done the error checking, we actually call the original function with the modified arguments. So we need to actually reconstruct this part of the function. So maybe to make it a bit clearer, I can rename this to modified args, and then down here, just call this modified args, like that. Okay. Cool. Now what we can do now is that we simply delete this, and we delete that, and we can annotate these two functions with the decorator function. So the error checking code has just been, we've just moved that into the decorator function. And when we when we call simple arith, right? So I'll just demonstrate here. So we can call this with the modified arguments, right? So we can see that the casting is working correctly, like that. The result is 6, 5 plus 1. And if we give it something that's an invalid input, like a negative sign, then instead of raising a value error, we are catching the error and simply returning the message. Now, what happens here is that when we're calling simple arith, instead of calling simple arith, it's the decorator function that gets called, and because it's a wrapper function, it wraps around the simple arith function. So when we're calling simple arith, decorator gets called with simple arith as an argument. And in the and in this wrapper function, we are taking out the argument, so num1, num2, like here in this line, and then we are doing a casting. And if we get an invalid input, we simply return the message invalid input here. So what we're doing is we're modifying the input, and if it checks out, then we simply call the function. So we simply call simple arith with the modified arguments. If it does not check out, if we get an error, we catch the error, and then we return a message called invalid input. And you'll notice here that this can be used in it is actually used in quite a lot of libraries out there, a lot of Python libraries, and it can also be used in all cases where there is something that's getting repeated. If there's some block of code that is repeated across functions, and you see, yeah, so if there's repetition, this is a very fine way to sort of reduce the number of repeated code blocks that you have. And yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video and that you learned something new.